Now, to set the scene, let's have a look briefly at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that New Zealand signed up to. In particular, goal number 4, which is about providing inclusive, equitable and quality education to all citizens. And in particular, 4.6, which relates to literacy and numeracy and sees the essential and transformative role of literacy and numeracy in people's lives. So in a New Zealand context, the Sustainable Development Goals of 4.6, literacy and numeracy, relate to adults having the literacy and numeracy skills to fully participate in our growing knowledge economy. But number 2, it also is there to build resilience for them in changing times, so to be prepared for changes in the workplace, society, all of these things, and to be lifelong learners. So the Sustainable Development Goals are based on the idea of lifelong learning. And the lifelong learning paradigm is based on the idea that society is now going to be changing very quick. Change is the new normal. And so because change is the new normal, all the education you had at one point in time, perhaps when you were younger, is not sufficient to keep people prepared for the world they're going to be in. For example, you're going to have to learn to use new types of software, use new sorts of systems, new sorts of machines, and maybe retrain for new sorts of jobs that we don't even know are going to exist yet. Change is the new normal. And literacy and numeracy are seen as a way of building resilience for people so that they can adapt to that change. We believe that by integrating some aspects of learner agency with literacy and numeracy provision, we can have a huge impact on supporting learners to become lifelong learners. And I want to talk about this in regards to vulnerable learners and learners who have resilience and what some of the outcomes of this might be. So who are the learners most vulnerable? Well, clearly it's those with the lowest skills or with low skills. However, some recent research has suggested that those vulnerabilities are multiplicative and they stack up. To give you an example, imagine that you had an adult who had low reading skills. Well, low reading skills are highly correlated with negative life outcomes. But imagine they intersect with also low numeracy skills. Well, actually, longitudinal studies show us that it is highly correlated with negative life outcomes. But then it might also intersect with low digital literacy skills, low health or financial literacy skills, and on the list goes. It might be learning anxieties, maths anxieties, and so on. And so these vulnerabilities begin to stack up. Now, it doesn't mean that this person, this individual, is necessarily going to fail and struggle with their course, but it means the vulnerability ratio increases dramatically for this person. Okay, meet Sarah. Sarah is a real person and Sarah has lower literacy and numeracy skills. And we don't have time to go into each of these little aspects and how they might influence her or cause her difficulties or vulnerabilities. But what I want you to get the idea of is how these things compound as we go around. So number 1, Sarah has difficulties reading and making sense of text. And what that means is she has difficulties learning from what she's reading. She has difficulties comprehending, retaining, and then recalling that information. And also, she doesn't monitor her comprehension very well, which means, unfortunately, like many other readers, she's not even that sure when she's not comprehending what she should. So she might just continue to read through, but not even really recognize that she's not learning as she should from the text. Number 2, Sarah doesn't use good learning strategies. So she's not sure which learning strategies are effective and useful for her, so she tends to rely on things like memorization strategies and so on, or just what activities the tutor gets her to do. In other words, she's not really a good learner. She doesn't know how to teach herself information. Not her fault, she's just unaware of how to do that. Number 3, Sarah is unlikely to seek help when encountering difficulties. I mean, this is a biggie, and this is found for adult learners who have lower literacy and numeracy skills, as a good proportion of them will tend to avoid interaction with the tutor or with the organisation and instead take a back seat. So she won't take advantage of those things that you might have put in place for her, all those things that are there to help, like talk to the tutor and get some extra tutoring or go online and all of this sort of thing. She won't do that. She'll just retreat. Number 4 is that she will interpret difficulties that she has in learning as a personal inability to make sense of knowledge. So when she's struggling with her learning, she'll tend to doubt herself and think, gee, I'm just not smart enough to do that, which is devastating for Sarah because this is just going to erode her confidence more. And finally, she's not going to set goals, which means she'll probably fall into this aimless learning, it's called in the research, where she's not really sure where she should attend, where she should put her energies to learn. She'll be following the stuff online, but she won't be really direct about what she needs to learn and how she needs to go about it. So you can see that if it was just one of these things, she might be able to overcome this just by pure will and determination and so on. But when you begin to stack these things up, things are looking pretty tough for Sarah. So let's explore one particular aspect of this just to see how they can increase vulnerability. Each of these areas can increase vulnerability. Sarah interprets confusion or difficulty learning things as an indication that she's not smart enough to learn the content. And this is devastating. For example, some people, when they get confused or they're not sure, they knuckle down and they work hard and they read and they push through. But for Sarah, she thinks that this means that she's not smart enough to learn the content. Devastating. Let me introduce you to the idea of the brick wall. The idea of the brick wall is that it shows up across the research as a thing that adults talk about in terms of content they can't understand. So if I asked you to think of a topic back in school or something that you couldn't quite wrap your head around, a lot of people talk about algebra or trigonometry or chemistry or so on, just something that they just suddenly stopped being able to understand, and that was it. It signaled the end of your interest in that subject. So for Sarah, it was fractions, and here's what she says about fractions. My brick wall was fractions. That was as far as I could go. I didn't learn anything after that. Now here's the interesting thing about brick walls. All learning, it turns out, is a process of hitting a brick wall, battling your way through it, and then realizing you've battled your way through it through work and study and so on, and then advancing, usually on a little bit of an accelerated learning curve, until you hit the next brick wall. And then you're like, gee, I can't understand this, what's going on? And you work hard and you battle through it and you finally make sense of it. And then off you go again until you hit the next brick wall. But now when you hit the third brick wall, you've kind of got this positive belief about yourself. You're like, boy, I was able to work through the first one and the second one. I think if I work hard enough, I'll get through this one as well. And you do. You push through it. And now this person is full of confidence. They have good positive beliefs about themselves. And they go on and they achieve well, pushing through these different brick walls. But a lot of people get stuck at that brick wall and then they disengage and they don't keep pushing it. And think about the beliefs that that person has about their ability to get past brick walls. This leads to a particular cycle that is prevalent in the lower foundation level adult education. Let me show you. When a learner comes on one of your courses who has negative beliefs about themselves, often they come on a course and they ask themselves this question. This is the question in their mind, at the forefront of their mind. Am I smart enough to do this course? And then what happens is they start to progress into the content. They hit a brick wall, because brick walls are natural and they're everywhere. They hit the brick wall, but they interpret the brick wall, this difficulty learning or this almost impossibleness about being able to learn the content. They interpret that as being that they're not smart enough. And then what they do is they stop even trying because they don't believe that trying will really make a whole lot of difference. And then they disengage or they begin to avoid it. Maybe they go to different topic areas and so on, but they won't come back and work through it. And then that reinforces this negative belief. Now, if you get enough of these going together, you can see what happens. The person just disengages and disengages and disengages until, finally this is a person who has really negative beliefs about their ability to learn. This leaves Sarah at huge risk of what's called the Matthew effects. Now, the Matthew effects simply mean this. They mean the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. And in this case, we're talking about skills and lifelong learning. Those people with high skills, like the positive beliefs, will go on to knock down brick wall after brick wall and develop good beliefs, and they'll go on to be highly successful. Sarah, on the other hand, is at risk of falling into a negative pattern where even the skills that she has, because she doesn't use them, she might begin to lose. So there's a truism in the adult numeracy world, which is if you don't use it, you lose it, you know. And so the idea is if she's not using those skills, then they'll slowly erode. And over time, not using those skills, we'll see her lose the skills she has, plus she's avoiding engagement and so on. So if we just look at a spectrum of skills or a continuum of skills, think about people who are at this end of the spectrum. You know, they have fairly high skills. They're able to learn difficult things, and then that reinforces their beliefs and they engage more because they get good feelings out of it. They learn more, and as they learn more, that allows them to learn more. They're on a positive learning cycle. They're just going to go from strength to strength throughout their lives. So their company might introduce some sort of new software or something that they have to use. They're able to transition to that nicely because they're confident in their ability to learn new systems and skills, and they do it. And so they become proficient learners. The people down the other end, however, are at great risk of falling into those Matthew effects. As they have difficulty learning, they disengage, and then they develop negative beliefs or reinforce those negative beliefs that they have. They disengage more and more and more and so on. They are not positive learners, and so even the skills that they have, they'll lose. And so what we're talking about is a dramatic split here, a divide in skills that continues to grow. So we've had a look at some of those vulnerabilities that exist for those learners with lower skills. So what can we do about it? Well, there's some really great positive stuff on the horizon. And one of these is learner agency. And the reason that we like learner agency in this particular time is that it directly decreases vulnerability to the very things we've seen. It increases resilience, achievement, and performance. And it trains people to be lifelong learners, and you only need to train them for a while, and then they'll go on to continue to be lifelong learners throughout their lives. And that's why we want to integrate literacy and numeracy provision with some of the aspects of learner agency, because together they'll make a powerful force as we go forward. So let's have a look at some of the skills that learners who have high learner agency are able to do. Well, number one, they're able to identify clear learning goals for themselves, and that allows them to write learning plans. So they're able to think about what they want to achieve and then come up with a plan to achieve it. They're able to use really good strategies to learn, and they're able to self-improve these strategies also over time. They're able to identify and use resources, and this includes people and tools. So they're able to use those to help them achieve their goals through their plans and so on. They're able to manage their own motivation, deal with discouragement, with all of those effective challenges that happen and so on. And they're able to evaluate their own performance against their own outcome selections that they've come up with and make changes to their plan independently if they need to. So basically they're really good self-learners, and they continue to improve their literacy and numeracy skills as they do this. Let's have a look at goal setting in particular. I asked a foundation level learner, Nikki, about her goal setting activities. Here's what she said. I don't really set any goals. I just come in and do the work and carry on. So Nikki's great, right? She comes in, does the work, she's a workhorse, she's going to work hard, but because she doesn't set goals, in a sense, she's really setting herself up for failure and unable to implement these other things that will really help her be successful. Now, there are lots of cultural ways to address this, and I'll give you one example. So some tutors were working with Nikki and some other people in a course and decided to use the legends of Maui to begin to discuss why goal setting is important and to run through the learner agency plan. So the tutor told the story to the class about the legend of Maui and the sun, and the idea being that the sun, Tira, is moving through the sky too quickly. So Maui and his brothers devise a plan to slow him down. They collect resources, create a net, and then they catch the sun, and they negotiate a successful deal at the end of it. So by using this story, the tutors are then able to pull out some key points after this. So the first point is to recognize the opportunity for action. So there's an opportunity for action. What is it? What does it do? Number 2, design a plan. Number 3, collect resources. And so in the case of resources, that's people and tools. And then finally, put the plan into action and make sure the plan is working as it should and adapt if possible. So the tutor and the learners were able to talk about the legend of Maui and then talk about the story and then pull out those little learning plans out of it and then begin to think about how this relates to learning. How can you recognize areas for action? What actions can you take? How can you set goals? What would your plan be? What would your resources be? What people and tools could you pull on? And what will you do when your plan isn't working? Or if it's not working, what are you going to do? Are you going to seek help? Are you going to get support? Are you going to change your plan and so on? So there's lots of opportunities for ways to develop this kind of thinking in learners. A second example is to support learners to use really effective learning strategies. That is, so they can use learning strategies to learn how they want to. Not all learning strategies are created equal. Some are better than others. Some simply facilitate memorization, while others, elaboration strategies, produce deep processing and really good long-term knowledge. And so we want to support learners to be able to use those effectively for their own learning. A third example is supporting educators to use really effective activities that have long-term benefits for the learners and promote agency. For example, imagine that you were teaching a lesson on this explanatory text to do with how to use a chainsaw. Now, as a literacy tutor, you might have two options. You might decide to turn it into a close exercise, or you could use it as an exercise looking at text structure and so on. Now, the close exercise will help learners comprehend and make sense of it and use vocabulary. However, the benefits to the learner are local. That is, they only really exist inside of that text. On the other hand, if you were to do a lesson on text structure, that is, headings, subheadings, topic sentences, bullet points and so on, and how to skim and scan and all of those things, then you develop a set of skills that are transferable to other environments or other contexts. So out of those two activities, in some circumstances, the text structure activity is actually better for learner agency than the close exercise. And we want to explore this more and give tutors and educators options about which activities might produce learner agency. Here are a couple of the areas that we explore within the report. The first one are effective factors. That's things like motivation, self-efficacy, enabling beliefs, and so on, all vitally important. Number 2, metacognitive skills. That's knowing how to set up and manage your own learning. Number 3, learning strategies. Knowing which learning strategies are effective for the time and then how to use them. And finally, problem-solving skills, helping people to know what to do when they don't know what to do, which is also going to be a valuable skill as we go forward into the future. All of this information is available in the report and more, and the idea of the report is to get us thinking, to initiate some thinking about what's possible in this literacy and numeracy space. Watch this space because we're going to be implementing some projects soon, and they're going to have information for organisations, educators and tutors. Thanks very much for tuning in. Go well.